So it's 2 minutes after 12 Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern, and 10 o'clock for you folks out there attending on the West Coast. I want to make sure we make the best use of everyone's time, so we'll be beginning real soon. This webinar is on the subject of reduced capital expenditures as caused by COVID-19. So we're going to talk about how to make the most of your MRO budget in these challenging times. Again, this webinar is produced by Torque Technologies, exclusive stocking agency for GoizperUSA. Goizper is a manufacturer of power transmission devices, and Torque Technologies is located in Sarasota, Florida. With that, I'd like to start. Your presenters today are three individuals, along with Brad Binks, who will be answering your questions, and myself, I'm the webinar moderator. Tom Coyle Sr., he is an industry sales specialist for Torque Technologies. He spent over 40 years in the clutch and brake field, in the metal forming and material handling industries. Before joining Torque Technologies, Tom worked for BCN, Bliss Clearing Niagara, and Schuler Group as a clutch and brake sales and product manager. Ralph Cash started his career at USI Clearing in the early 80s and spent 3 years at Verson Press, all of this in Chicago, working in manufacturing and automotive industries in various roles, including project management, training, proposal engineering, and press repair. Ralph has completed more than 20 successful conversions, including many with Torque Technologies. Ralph is currently Vice President of Press Services at Rock Mechanical Services. Dan Spencer, who's a regional industry sales specialist from Torque Technologies, is based in Sarasota, Florida, where Tom is based in the Detroit area. Dan brings 20 years of technical expertise in mechanical systems for automotive applications, combined with more than 10 years of experience building teams in the Army, and has been with Torque Technologies as an industry sales specialist in metal forming for 3 years. Your president of Torque Technologies, Brad Binks, will be answering questions throughout the webinar. So if you've got a question, please use the Q&A format. Brad will see the question and will provide you with an answer, or if you need a follow-up afterwards, we can certainly do that. And again, I'll be your webinar moderator, and so we'll proceed. So the agenda, today we want to take no more than about 45 to 50 minutes of your time. There is a pretty concise agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about why we put this webinar together, of course, CAPEX and COVID. Then we're going to get into some specific areas surrounding why you should consider upgrades or modernizations or a retrofit, given the current situation. The meat of the presentation will be talking about how a retrofit is done and discussing some case studies that we've done for some conversions. And then we'll end that with some real specific information about the different types of clutches and brakes and material that you might consider. And at the end, we'll have information for you to download, and we'll send that to you in the form of an email. So why are we doing this? Well, when we put this webinar together about 4 or 5 weeks ago to today, we all know that the world has greatly changed, and it changes every day. COVID-19 was an external shock to the world. It's forced everybody to rethink their business, not just their business, but their lives. We know that safety is paramount overall, and it takes priority over everything else. But while we're sitting there within our own companies, we have to think about things that directly affect us. Of the participants here today, including metal stampers, press manufacturers, and some distributors, nearly 60% responded that they've seen a reduction in the capital expenditure budgets and MRO. As a matter of fact, 33% said they've seen a greatly reduced CAPEX and MRO budgets. So we're hoping that this is timely. If your capital expenditures are reduced, and even if your MRO budget is reduced, we're hoping that we can address how to keep your plants running with some of the solutions we have here today. Next, in terms of what we're all doing, is hopefully opening up. Obviously, we've been opening for a while, but as part of that, not only from a safety standpoint, but from a business standpoint, we know that we all need to look for ways to improve our efficiency and maintain liquidity. And one of those is to look at operational equipment efficiency. Tom Coyle will be talking about that at length. And the future is, what are we doing for the next normal? Well, one of the things that we hear in the news is that there's going to be an onshoring, not just for items like personal protective equipment, medical devices, medical manufacturing, but across the board. That the country is looking at the pandemic as a way to reevaluate where their supply chains are. So if there's more onshoring, there's going to be a need for required capacity. And we'd like to think that right now, given there's been a bit of introspection, that it's the time to act on any stalled initiatives you might have or your customers might have. So if you've got planned or preventive maintenance that you haven't just gotten around to, this is the time to do that. And with that, I'd like to introduce Tom Coyle again, who can talk about why a retrofit can be an MRO solution. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the introduction and appreciate your overview. I'm finding, and we're finding the same thing. There are a lot of companies that have multiple industries they're servicing, and they don't seem to have the reduced CAPEX budgets that people in the automotive industry, and by that I mean the automotive manufacturers, their key suppliers, their equipment manufacturers. We're all seeing a considerable reduction in CAPEX budgets from our customers, and along with that, we're seeing budget cuts in MRO budgets. So what we're doing is we'd like to propose or suggest that perhaps there are ways and means to use the MRO maintenance budgets to look at upgrading assemblies, upgrading clutches and brakes, buying components for clutches and brakes. But what we want to do is, through a retrofit, we can certainly address like persistent downtimes and other applications. And again, you can see that on the screen itself. But what you mentioned, Jeff, about the onshoring, we're seeing an awful lot of potential opportunities coming across the board. And we're seeing new contracts with Asian countries. We're seeing new contracts with Mexico, Canada, and ourselves. And a lot of that is generating work back here onshore, back in the United States. So there will be a considerable need for making sure equipment is up and running consistently and producing great throughput. Thank you.
Sure, Tom, and if I might add, one of the folks who responded in the survey said that they are having customers who've greatly reduced their CAPEX budgets because of lost business or paused business. But the response regarding MRO is, as one customer indicated, if it has to be fixed, we will fix it. So along those lines, is it time to upgrade your clutches and brakes?
Jeff, that's interesting because we are right in the process right now of reviewing the potential to do a conversion on a 1,250-ton press, and that will be strictly through a maintenance budget because the customer has stopped all CAPEX spending. So yes, and as far as is it time to upgrade your press, I want to just take a look at the picture. And if you see that clutch and brake, I see nothing but headaches and problems. You have a separate clutch brake, so there's a potential for overlap. You have old components. What are you going to do if you can't buy spare parts? And also you see a lot of inertia, a lot of heat buildup, and you'll experience a lot of the items that we have listed on the slide. But basically, you can take that clutch, and I am quite sure you can buy a new clutch brake for about the same price as it would take, maybe even a reduced price it would take to buy a full set of components to put that clutch brake back in service. Thank you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the pinch point. We call it the pinch point, and really that's a result of the what the current market status is, the current production status, and what the market demands are. And you see those pushing together, resulting in a substantial risk and of uncontrolled downtime, and you can't make your production needs. And so really, I'd like to ask Ralph Cash, with his 35 years of extensive experience in the metal stamping industry, to comment on the what his points have been regarding living in these pinch points. Ralph, what do you think about that?
Well, I appreciate it, Tom, and my thanks to Torque Technologies for allowing me to participate in the on the webinar. And I want to preface all this by saying that the things I say, especially when it comes to the current status, this is my assessment of what I've seen hundreds of in the hundreds of plants that I've been in the last 35 years. This is strictly my assessment of what I've seen over the past several years, from starting with USI clearing to the current. So jumping into the current status, you can see the 6 bullet points that are listed here. And the last 3, the age, the equipment, the no spare capacity, and the obsolete parts, I think those 3 run together to some degree. The aged equipment could lead to no spare capacity and obsolete parts. And as Dan and I were talking before the webinar began, you have a piece of equipment, and you purchase a piece of equipment. You're not sure what that press was doing prior to the purchase of that press, and then you're asking it to run in a situation that it was not intended to run, and the application is not what was intended. Whether it's a clutch and brake that we have found recently on a press that was actually it was intended to run in a single stroke, in a continuous application, but they were running it into in a continuous, it was meant to, but they were running it in a single stroke capacity, and in 3 years they burn up to 2 new clutches and brakes. So it ended up being a simple retrofit with a clutch brake that produced linings that would dissipate the heat, but that was the issue there. So I think those last 3 items could run together. The limited planned downtime, I think that's a problem that's been throughout history of this industry, and I don't know if there's any real answer to that, because parts, that's your production. And we're going to get into some of the things that could help with that limited downtime as we move on into this webinar, but that's been a problem that's plagued our industry for many, many years. I think the one glaring weakness that we see, and I think most people on this panel would agree with these and the presenters, is the first one there, the reduced skilled workforce.
I was going to ask.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh no, I was going to ask Dan and get back with you, Ralph, to end up on that. But Dan, what have you found with this reduced skilled workforce with your peers? You're in an age group that are people going into the skilled trades, for instance.
Right, Tom. So I'm even a product of it. So I feel like we've trained an entire generation that going to college is going to be the only way to be successful in life. So the skilled trades has certainly fallen off. The trade schools are getting close to free, or at least funded by states, but it's just not something that's seen as value add or even anything blue collar. So finding someone my age who is willing to go into anything mechanical or anything that's anything that uses a set of dial calipers to measure or anything getting your hands dirty is it's getting harder and harder to find. So, but yeah, so I just see that in my age group or even among my peers. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, that seems to be a big problem. Ralph, go ahead. I didn't mean to, what, please talk a little more about the reduced skilled workforce that Dan mentioned.
Well, I
You're
was
out in
actually,
plants a lot, so you're running into this every day.
I was actually in Dan's age bracket years ago when we started to foresee that this was going to be a problem 10, 20 years down the road. But at that particular point, those that were actually calling the shots on the training of employees is that they were at that age bracket like where I am now. So 20 years didn't mean anything to them, but it meant something to us back then. And that thing that it's not the fault of the mechanics or the technicians or the press operators, and it certainly is not the fault of the leadership. It's just where we are today. But I think with the demands that we're going to be getting into moving forward, we're going to have to address that, because I think we're going to have more manufacturing, more production, those types of things are going to be brought back. There's going to be more demand on our equipment, and we're going to have to get to the point where we need to start training our people, and that goes from the top down to the bottom, including press operators, maintenance workers. And again, and it's like I preface this whole thing, that's just what I've seen happening. You know, I saw it happening in 1993, and it's not, some companies, let me say this, some companies do a good job, but most don't do a good job. And it's not that they don't care. In many cases, it's not that they don't want to, it's how do we do this? And if
Ralph,
you have what, go ahead.
I was going to say, Ralph, so we've got the situation as you're talking about with the reduced skill workforce, and I wonder if you could just segue into how companies like Torque Technologies and like yours, Press Rebuilders, can address this, because obviously there is a bank of knowledge out there that we can draw upon while we're trying to build up the workforce. And so one of the things is there are people, not just yourself or Torque Technologies, but there are people in the industry that you should look for who can provide best practice solutions, because they know what they're doing. They can take a look at a press.
Actually, that was the next point I was going to make. There are resources out there that are available. Torque Technologies certainly is one main one when it regarding the clutch and brakes. But there are resources out there that are available and can add value added to your skilled workforce to offer that training. And if you need help in that area, you don't know where to turn, please contact us, and we'll help you and point you in the right direction on getting that type of skill. But that's where it's going to go. And I think that just bleeds right into the limited stock spare parts. Some companies, they don't inventory parts because they don't have the money to do it. And that's just the way it is. But some, they don't inventory parts because they don't want the inventory. They don't want the order. They don't want to ask for. And as far as the clutch and brakes go, you know, Torque Technologies would be a good resource, very good resource for that moving forward when it comes to having spares on site. And we'll even hit that point in the anatomy of a retrofit. But Tom, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to turn this over to Brad Binks, who has just received a very interesting question regarding automation. Brad, can you jump in on this?
Well, yes, of course, Ralph here has been speaking to the point of skilled trades, and and the reduction of skilled labor in the workforce. And one of the questions that came through, which is really timely, is what's the impact of automation on all of this? And I think we've seen very positive impact in production capacity with automation, and this certainly has helped fill the gap on a lot of skilled trade issues and unskilled trade or unskilled labor issues for that matter. But I think when we're talking about skilled workforce, what we see at Torque Technologies when we visit customers, we still see very good people. We see very talented people. There's fewer of them. They are, of course, handling not only the stamping presses, but all the automation, whether it be welding automation or the automation around the presses, feeds, whatever it is they have in their plant. And when it gets down to some of the nuts and bolts that we deal with and we end up working with the customers, what we don't see is the depth of knowledge and that there used to be years ago, especially in the stamping industry. And I think that that's partially what Ralph was alluding to here. Those of us that have been in the business for a long time, Ralph at Clearing, I remember calling on Clearing years ago, selling them, believe it or not, some clutches and brakes. But these companies no longer exist, and with them not in the marketplace, we have very good suppliers here. Other stamping companies and other stamping press OEMs and so on, but we don't have the depth of people that we used to have across the board. And I think that impacts and how we go about it. Automation goes along production, but it's not a complete answer. You still have to have the human knowledge behind it all. So.
Thanks, Brad. It brings up another point which Ralph was mentioning, and you just brought up about there are people in the workplace. And in fact, we found the last couple jobs we've looked at, the customers come to us to be the total solution. And we're doing not only supplying a clutch brake, we're doing the engineering, the transportation, the manufacturing of bracketing, any machining, and we're taking charge of the whole project. So we're seeing that again as a reduction of workforce. And I'd like to go to the next slide if we could, and talk a little bit about and ask Ralph to jump in because he's done a lot of this, but another thing we're finding, and a lot of our people in our audience know this because they do it also, but Ralph's had a lot of experience doing press inspections when he worked for press manufacturers, when he worked for major manufacturers, major stamping manufacturers. But, obviously if we can get customers to allow press inspections, from there we can do the preventive maintenance program, set those up to match what we found with the press inspections to keep equipment running. Ralph, again, if you wouldn't mind joining me to just talk a little bit about the advantages of doing a press inspection in PM programs.
Sure, Tom. On the inspections, I think it could be left unsaid, but I'll say it anyway. It's the key to understanding your condition of your equipment, to get an overall view of what shape your machine is. And by taking that information, you can then develop a action plan for addressing the issues that are found during the inspection. But it's not just the inspection as a whole, it's understanding the information that you're gathering on the press inspection. And I think in the past, the thought should be, provide information as if the person that's reading it has never seen a press before, to make it as user-friendly as possible. But I think, again, going back to my first comment, inspections are the key in understanding the condition of your equipment, because you can't fix what you don't understand, and you can't fix what you don't know. And in this case, with our machines, ignorance is not bliss. It's not a human body. It's not going to heal itself. A mechanical press or hydraulic or whatever, it's only going to get worse. But you can't fix it if you don't understand it. And then you got to understand the information that you're looking at, your brake travel. What does that brake travel mean, and how I'm running the press? You know, do I have 2 months? Do I have 1 month? I mean, you know, when I was with Clearing, we walked away from a press where the lead technician said, I'm going to put money down that that thing is going to fail within the next 7 days. And they called the next day. Because if you understand what your brake travel, where your brake travel is in comparison to how you're operating the press, you can make a good educated guess based on the inspection when you should start planning on some downtime to fix your clutch and brake, even to do an adjustment. Or you might, if you got some adjustment on it, you might be able to do the adjustment right then. But your nut screw clearances, your counterbalance pressures, you know, I've been in a lot of places where they just set the air pressure and then they just run. They don't take into consideration the upper die weight. A lot of the newer equipment, it does all the thinking for you as you punch those numbers in, but you still need to look it over and to make sure that that they're setting the air pressure. All this can be found and accumulated during the press inspections. And then in my sheet, I've got an arrow going to the PMs and back to the inspections, because, you know, I find too that there's a lot of companies that incorporate the preventive maintenance, where there's daily, monthly, bi-monthly, bi-yearly, or whatever. But you can take some of what you find in the inspections, you can incorporate that into your preventive maintenance. And especially if you find something, for example, there was a company that had in the intermediate drive, the Timken nut was backing off and it was causing a catastrophic failure. Well, without going into the problem of what the problem was, they took that information, incorporated into a daily PM so that they could check to make sure that AN nut was still tight to avoid a catastrophic failure, so they could go ahead and plan some downtime. So you can take the preventive maintenance, incorporate it into your inspection, the information you gather, and vice versa. And by doing that and understanding, again, you have to understand the information you're looking at and how to incorporate that into your incorporating your PM program, setting that up, and that'll help improve your OEE numbers. It will limit your downtime, and it'll help you with that planning of that downtime that we saw in the pinch points or the current status. It'll help you develop some downtime when you can address those issues. So it'll help you become more proactive rather than reactive on your presses. Tom?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so really, in result of, result of all of this we're talking about is going to lean manufacturing, which can be a very successful operating measure with overall equipment effectiveness. And if we can go to the next slide, highlighting some of the biggest losses, just going to one section under availability, and the OEE big losses concern availability, quality, and performance. If you look at item 2, the downtime, the breakdowns, and we go to the examples, and this is exactly what we're talking about: the equipment failures, the on-plan maintenance, and the damaged tooling. You'll see that. And if we can go to the next slide, just to give an example, on the right side of the page, there's overall equipment effectiveness calculations, and that's availability and performance times quality. And if you look in the example, 88% availability, 95% performance, and 94% quality, you think, boy, those are really good numbers, and they are, but you multiply those together by the OEE calculation, and you're at 79%. And the harbor reports and other international measurements state that 85% is world-class and 60% is normal or typical for OEE. So if you're down at the 60%, there's a lot of room for improvement that you can realize in increasing those numbers by doing things like upgrading equipment, doing clutch brake retrofits. Thank you. I'd like to now call on Ralph to get into some specifics of the retrofit process.
Well, Tom, as you know, the anatomy of retrofit begins with the compiling of information that Torque Technologies would need to specify the clutch and brake for the application for the customer, the right clutch and brake. So as you see on the screen, there are two questionnaires. One is more engineering driven. The other one is more toward the budgetary. Now, Torque developed the budgetary questionnaire, which I find it has been a lot easier to handle if you're one of the technicians in the field or one of the service individuals in the field. So fill it out, take the left one, get that questionnaire, fill it out as best as you can, as much as possible, and then turn that information over to Torque Technologies. Next screen. So you're able to take that information, turn it over to Torque Technologies, and then they put it into the application engineering for review. And in that review, you'll measure the torque, as you see the numbers there, the shaft stress, the clutch and brake requirement, the braking capacity, and then the brake reaction bracket. All of that is taken into account when you're going to specify the clutch and brake. All right, next slide. This is something that I like that Torque Technologies provides, is a finite element analysis and stress calculations on certain parts. It could be the shaft, but in this case, you're looking at a brake reaction bracket. And this is nothing more than a safeguard to ensure that the customer is getting the right product, and he's comfortable with what he sees here, knowing that the retrofit, the new clutch and brake bracket, shaft, whatever other parts are going to go through the finite element analysis, mostly it's just the brake bracket, can handle the torque for the new clutch and brake, and it gives Torque Technologies the comfort that they know that they're providing a good product to their customer. Next slide. Then in the anatomy of retrofit, you can see the process that you would go through. You can see those, and I think most of those go without saying. But the two things I want to take away on this particular sheet is, one, if you were only able to get some of the information when the spec for the clutch and brake was specified from the engineering review, now is the time to get your additional information. While it's coming apart, you can get a tape on it, calipers on it, whatever you need, and then you can take those final dimensions to verify that what you were specifying is accurate. Because remember, it's just a budgetary questionnaire to give you the cost and the specification for the clutch and brake that's being recommended. This last step here is going to verify that what you're getting is actually the correct clutch and brake. Now, and if you need any other parts like modifications to the brake bracket or whatnot. Then the last step there is the aftermarket support. Something that Torque Technology also provides is a quote for all perishable items. So if you get the, if you're able to get that quote from Torque Technologies on the perishable items for your clutch and brake, if you're not able to order those, then you can't inventory them. You know, that's fine, but keep that close to where you can grab it with your finger, with your fingers at your fingertips, so you can move on to if you need them, you can order it when you need them. So, Tom.
Yeah, Ralph, appreciate if we could just kind of go through quickly some of the case studies, because I know you mentioned earlier that, and I know you've done multiple clutch and brake retrofits, and we're very grateful that a lot of those have been with Goizper clutch brakes. If you could just briefly go through some of the conversions as examples, would appreciate it.
Sure. Sure, Tom. The first case study we have here is a 150-ton Versen. It had the original hydraulic clutch brake on it. The customer called company A and made the statement that I'm losing oil. I mean, I'm losing oil by the barrels daily, and they're taking that oil and putting it back into the reservoir. So his question, well, the other statement that he made was, we don't really know what the company that we bought this press from, we don't really know what they were doing as far as their application and stamping. So, excuse me. So the question I have is, do I need a hydraulic unit? And if I don't, can I retrofit it with a pneumatic clutch and brake? So company A went in and took all the information that was necessary and got all the hardness of the material, the upper die weight, the speed, the flywheel speed, the shaft speed. They took all the press specs, took all of that, went and put it into the engineering department. And the answer to his first question was no, you're not generating the kind of the heat that whatever the customer needed this for prior to you purchasing the press. You don't need a hydraulic clutch and brake for what you're doing. So the answer to your second question is yes, you can retrofit this with a pneumatic clutch brake. So next slide shows shows basically, this is, I don't think this was the finished drawing on the right hand side there, but it was close to the preliminary drawing. But company A went in, again, got all the information. The customer scheduled their downtime, and then the technicians went in and started to disassemble the drive assembly. And at that time, again, as I said in the previous, on the and one of the previous slides, this was the time that they took whatever measurements they needed that they couldn't get when the press was running before, especially on a hydraulic unit when that whole assembly was enclosed. So they were able to finalize all the additional dimensions. So, and the issues that they found were the shaft was broken. So a new shaft was supplied. New clutch support ring was manufactured and made. New spacers were made. The new brake pin supports were manufactured and installed. And then some of the pneumatic lines and lubrication lines, it called for some rearranging, obviously, of those lines. So let me say this: and I know I probably said a lot so far, but if from here on out, if you don't remember anything I've said, remember this: is a retrofit does not have to be complex. Now on the surface, this looks like a very complex clutch and brake retrofit, but it doesn't have to be complex if you're working with the right people and you're working as a team. Customer and company A work together as a team, and we're able to finish this retrofit. Now the manufacturing engineer that was involved in this particular plant, he took another position with a automotive plant in Illinois that was closer to his home, but we still stay in touch via texting. So it ended up being a successful conversion, going from hydraulic to pneumatic. Next slide.
Yes.
We'll go into the next study. This was an automotive supplier that had a 400-ton clearing, and they had the old Tornadyne pneumatic clutch brake on it. I think Tim Burns is on the panel. He would remember the Tornadyne clutch and brake. He's probably chuckling right now. But the company A went in, and it was intended to be just a regular clutch brake rebuild. But they ran into some problems where some of the parts were obsolete, including the replacement flywheel bearing, which would not hold the shaft straight, and it was allowing the flywheel to drag. So modifications had to be made to the flywheel, and other parts, the bearing had to be replaced, and you can see a partial drawing of the new drive assembly there. But the other issue that this company ran into was the air supply on the shaft would not line up with the new hub for the new Goizper clutch and brake. So at that point, there were only really two options. One, make a new drive shaft. And on this particular press, it would have been a very costly drive shaft to replace, or come up with an alternative solution. You know, I mean, you know what the old saying is, there are no problems, only solutions. So the company Company A, working with the engineers at Torque Technologies, came up with the idea that they could bring the air supply through the face of the clutch and brake, much like one of their competitors. You can see it there on the picture, bringing the air supply through the face of the new clutch and brake using 3/4 inch NPT quick exhaust. All of this was connected, and it turned out to be a very, very good solution to this particular customer. And again, you know, as I said, the first one case study looks like a complex study. This one looks like a complex study. But conversions don't have to be complex, and they don't have to be scary to the customer if you're working with the right people. You can take an older piece of equipment that has an obsolete clutch and brake, put a new Goizper clutch and brake on it, and you got a machine that'll last for years. So the next case study is on a 1,200-ton Versen, and Dan Spencer from Torque Technologies is going to take over from here, and he's going to go into that the Versen retrofit. So Dan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dan Spencer, Torque Technologies. One that we're currently working on. This one is in process. Like Ralph said, this is a 1,200-ton Versen press. It's a very large unit. So, but the customer had the original clutch brake on there. They were running it for a while, and then one of the housings cracked. They had it repaired, and then it cracked again. So they reached out to the OEM, of course, and replacing it was going to take months just for the clutch brake itself, then the installation. So in addition to the overarching cost was very high. So they reached out to us for an off-the-shelf retrofit. We met with the customer for a site visit to discuss the goals and the scope with the customer. And we were also looking forward to seeing the press, to see a running press. But we were unpleasantly surprised in the site visit to discover it had been removed for quite some time, leaving us to do only a static inspection of some of the parts.
I imagine that was quite a surprise to you, Dan. I know how you like to see things run, and
Yeah, so
do an evaluation that makes it a little hard without the clutch brake on the press.
it does. So as a whole, this is certainly not ideal. Trying to see the problem as there could be an overarching issue besides just the clutch brake. It might be a problem. So it could be, you know, the gear drive or the slides or several other factors that go into these machines. So, and I preface all this, you know, with these retrofits, we're all in the business of making money. So, but we need to give, we always give an honest assessment of the press and the clutch brake and the process, not to mislead the requirements of this press. So, and this, the recommendations, you know, it can include to ensure the press and components are a good retrofit for a good candidate for a retrofit. So we can't install a new clutch brake or recommend a new clutch brake if it's not going to solve or it may exacerbate or amplify an underlying issue. But we walked through this process with the customer, discussed the scope, and that we at Torque Technologies would own the entire process. So this is where that team building comes from that Torque Technologies offers. That it's us gathering the engineering support, us gathering the rigging support. So from the current site visit, engineering analysis, the design, the drawings, to the complete coordination with the press repair company, as well as machining, rigging, and installation is something that we build with that team to make sure it's a complete retrofit and a complete solution for the customer. So this particular retrofit requires little modification to the existing shaft and the plant equipment, and only requires manufacturing the brake reaction bracket, which is shown just to the right of the clutch brake, as you see in that picture. So, and all of this went from a months long lead time down to a little over a month. So we're looking at 6 weeks of manufacturing the clutch brake and then manufacturing the brake reaction bracket. And all of this goes into an off-the-shelf unit that Goizper offers that Torque Technologies supplies in Sarasota, Florida. So the industry knowledge, experience, and engineering expertise we offered in the previous retrofits, as well as this one, creates a complete package for our retrofit process that the customer gives us a problem, and we can provide a complete solution.
Thanks very much, Dan. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you did a good job, and it looks like the job's moving along. And I think one of the key points that you brought up to me was that we are taking a complete scope of supply of the whole retrofit process, you know, from clutch brake to machining to adaptation of the, you know, new bracketing, finite element analysis on the bracketing, et cetera. So congratulations on doing a great job. And if we could move to, thank you very much. And, you know, just to give our audience and our customers just kind of a feel for who is Goizper and where we are, many of our customers are, of course, world-class customers. And you look at the press manufacturers, you'll recognize, I'm sure all the manufacturers that have joined us today will recognize the press manufacturers that we're working actively with in supplying both hydraulic and pneumatic clutches. And further give examples of, you know, and reference points, you can see that we're also supplying all the major automotive manufacturers and also all their most of their tiers. And so, and it's funny, we go into a lot of the plants and we're kind of like the Maytag repairmen. They go, geez, I didn't know you had a Goizper clutch in. And turns out they do have them, and they just didn't realize they had them because they've had such success in running them without any problems. So it's a great point of reference that these people have reached out to look for best practices solutions. And I'd like to turn this back over to Dan, who can, Dan, if you could just give kind of a quick run view of the complete product line of the Goizper clutches and brakes.
Yeah, sure, Tom. We at Torque Technologies provide a wide range of products from Goizper to include clutch brakes, servo brakes, complete press drives, as well as Goizper's own Smart G diagnostic system. This slide. So Goizper pneumatic clutch brakes, a few of the benefits that distinguish us from our competitors are the split bonded linings, which makes lining changes very fast, decreasing downtime. Our lining design and compounds, as noted, are usually last about 25% longer than our competitors, and our stop time is 15% faster than our competitors. It certainly reduces faulty manufacturing and raw material waste, not to mention the safety factor. Next slide.
Hey, Dan,
Dan.
one question I had regarding the pneumatic clutches. I understand that a lot of our clutch brakes, if not, are interchangeable with our competitive clutch brakes.
That's correct. So they're designed to slide right into, most of ours are designed to drop into place of several other competitors, such as Ortlinghouse or Dash, and making it an easy retrofit. And that's something that we supply in Sarasota, Florida. So we supply the complete clutch brake at a minimum bore. So it takes 6 weeks off of manufacturing for most of our competitors, down to 1 week by the time it gets to the machine shop, it's cut and it's in your hands within 10 days. So that's something that we offer, at Torque Technologies as well as Goizper, that it's a drop-in solution into the existing pins, into the existing bracketry that you already have.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
if I can interject something there, yeah, I concur with Dan answering that. I saw a retrofit going back 6-7 years ago where it had an Ortlinghouse clutch brake on it, and the Goizper was actually a direct replacement. Matter of fact, the pins were okay that were in the flywheel. It's a 2-point clutch plate mounting on it. Pins fit perfectly. We left the pins in the flywheel and just put the new clutch brake on and gave the new pins to the customer for inventory.
Wow. That's pretty impressive, Ralph. I'm glad things slid right in, but that it's really not, that is not it's not necessarily a unique case, but that's good to hear from your mouth that they actually slid right in, or you had no problems with that, or you didn't have to do any machining.
Oh, that's perfect fit.
Awesome. Moving on with so some of the applications we have here with our pneumatic clutch brakes. We have cam body makers, compacting, forging, and then as you saw on the previous slide, stamping, and several other processes that we have pneumatic Goizper clutch brakes on. And then even moving into the hydraulic clutch brakes are low inertia, high torque, high speed, high performance machines that require maybe a single stroke instead of leaving the machine running, and it increases the how long the periods between maintenance. So it's a machine that you can leave alone for a very long time, and like I said, high performance. So moving on to the next slide, we can see some of the applications with metal forming, stamping, and very large shears, as well as in the can industry as well. We see that in cam body makers, as well as forging presses. So, and then moving on with servo brakes, they're getting a growing acceptance from press OEMs and leading manufacturers from Goizper as they move to the technology of servo motors. It's very accurate, very high speed. So our design does perform better than our competitors, and are on quite a few OEMs and their servo presses as we move into new technologies. So, and then us at Torque Technologies, I covered it in the 1200 ton version, but it definitely needs to be restated that we at Torque Technologies provide a complete customer service, just-in-time delivery with off-the-shelf parts stocked in Sarasota, as well as complete units from our size 10 to 81, as you'll see in our catalog. Ready to retrofit presses in the with that size 81, it goes all the way up to a nearly 1,000 ton range. So we have a team available for you, as well as we build the teams of teams for you and our customers to provide a complete clutch brake solution for your manufacturing needs. So that picture on the side is just a small portion of our warehouse in Sarasota, Florida, where we stock all the spare parts for that just-in-time delivery that all of our customers require.
Thank you, everybody. This is Jeff Bevington again, your moderator. I want to thank Tom, Dan, and Ralph and Brad for their participation in the webinar. Just a slide to remind you that whether it's the specification sheets that Ralph talked about, there are case studies in addition to the ones we talked about today that you can download, and there is a 15-page in-depth white paper that talks about the decisions you'll make to whether or not you repair, replace, or retrofit your clutch brake. So there's those and a wealth of resources available to you to download, whether you're directly thinking about it or if you are one of the reps or distributors that we work with and you want to have more information to help make your case. They're there on the website and they'll be made available to you afterwards. And with that, I just want to introduce Brad Binks again, who will wrap this up and talk about any unique questions that may have come through the webinar.
Well, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Tom and Dan and Ralph. I think hopefully everybody found that this was a very informative and certainly timely webinar. I have to say I learned a couple of things myself here today, and I like to always get my own takeaways from these things. And I want to thank all of our attendees for your day, and hopefully it was beneficial to you. We did receive some interesting questions, but you know, rather than go through them all, I think what I'd like to say is if there were any of you out there that have questions that you feel you'd like to have answered, maybe not now, but in the future something comes up, especially relative to your own operations, something happening, please feel free to contact us anytime. We're ready to help you. I encourage you to challenge us with application problems because Torque Technologies is ready to help you make your first steps. And with that, I thank you and wish you success.
Terrific. Thanks, Brad. We are in at 59 minutes, so 1 minute left. Again, we're gonna close this out, and the webinar itself will be made available for you to watch at your leisure, and please share it with friends and colleagues who may not have had a chance. So again, thank you very much. Have a great day.